All right. So welcome everyone to another All Core Dev Call. We have a lot of exciting proposals today that we're going to cover. So yeah, let's get started. This Before we get started, actually, I just wanted to give a few quick updates. So if you're running Celo blockchain version, if you're running Celo blockchain at all, we released version 1.2.4 publicly. So if you're not on this version, we highly recommend joining this using this version of Celo blockchain immediately. We have a forum post about it on our forum. I'm going to share the link in the chat. Let's see where the chat is. Here. This is the forum post on, actually, this is the wrong one. Let me get the forum post for, this is it. So we highly recommend everyone to be on this version right now if you're not on. So yeah. Otherwise, we opened cohort 7 application for the foundation voting program. So if you're a validator and you're in cohort 4, now's the time to check out the application to reapply. If you're a new validator interested in validating, you should check out the forum post for the cohort 7 application. And you can always DM me after if you want to learn more about this. Furthermore, later today, for North America friendly time zone, we have a core community happy hour. So if you're interested, I highly recommend joining. Deepak and I will be hosting. It's going to be on the core community, the Celo Signal calendar. If you're not on it, let me quickly copy the event link. I'm going to put it in the chat. This way, when you click on it, it automatically adds it to your calendar. So cool. With that, we'll get started. So the first item on the Celo All Core Dev Call agenda is CIP 32 about attestation node incentives. Cody, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, thanks, Yaz. Could I get permission to share the screen?
Yes. In order to do that, I need to make you co-host. Let me do that first.
Thank you. Yeah, so just while we wait, some background. So first of all, apologies if there's some construction noise in the background. Is unexpected, but I'm as far away as possible from it, so hopefully it's not too disturbing. So let me share my screen. Okay, so for some background, we've gone over CIP 32 for the last two all core dev calls. This is about providing incentives to run a healthy attestation service, as this is obviously an important part of the Celo protocol. And so the current proposal, the latest discussion is around splitting some portion of the validator rewards off to be used for attestation service. And so this is just an example. We could allocate 20% towards running the service successfully. And so the way that it was previously proposed is that we would have some kind of target completion rate, and based off of that individual attestation services completion rate, completion being a successful round trip of the SMS code and the user having completed it as part of the verification. So based off of that, they would receive some percentage of payout. And we recognize that this is, it's not possible to guarantee 100% success, even if as an attestation service operator, you're performing to the best of your abilities, just because there's a lot of things that are outside of your control, and there's just a natural abandonment rate that's part of human behavior. And so this kind of threshold right here, anything above this threshold, you would receive 100% payment, and then there would be like a linear degradation based off of the completion rate below this threshold. And so this was the proposal thus far, and this threshold would have been set via governance. So it would have been some like semi-static rate that we would have chosen, and based off of like, the historic completion rate. But what we've noticed over the past couple of weeks, especially, is that this completion rate can change, and what a natural completion rate, what we thought was, let's say 70%, can actually drop based off of factors that are outside of the control of a given node operator. So for example, a couple of weeks ago, we saw an outage, a 4-hour outage in Twilio, which across the board dropped attestation services completion rate. Now we're doing other means to bring that up and make it naturally so that it's more resilient. But there's instances like this where it would affect folks across the board. And so there's two interesting proposals that aim to fix this. One is from Victor and one is from Zviad. And guys, I know you're on the call as well, so feel free to add any additional context that if I miss anything. So these two proposals, one I call the dynamic target proposal. This is simply an addition on top of this existing proposal where this threshold can fluctuate and is dynamically set based off of the average completion rate. So if all attestation services average drops down to let's say 60%, then this threshold will automatically adjust accordingly, and it will be some percentage of the average. The second proposal is a slightly different shift, but it also has the same kind of idea of allocating a percentage of the rewards toward attestation service. However, in this case, it's a shared pool. So rather than a single attestation service being able to just get 100% max of their validator rewards, in fact, this percentage would of the attestation service would be thrown into a large pool across all validators and attestation services. And then each attestation service will receive a slice of that pool, a percentage, based off of the number of completions that they've done as a relative to like the total number of completions that everyone has done. So if you as an attestation service have completed 5% of the total number of attestations that everyone else has completed, you would receive 5% of this shared pool. And so if everyone performs the same as like, let's say on average, then everyone would receive the same amount. If some validators perform better, then they'll receive more, and better being defined as the number of attestations completed. And so the interesting thing for these two proposals is that they offer some kind of incentive, to a very small incentive, but some incentive to abuse the system, where they, like an attestation service operator, will get paid more if they start sending SMS to themselves and completing the ones that they receive. And so to kind of measure this, I put together these two models, and I'll share this in the chat. And what you can do is you can create a copy of this spreadsheet, and all of these assumptions are parameterized, so you can modify the parameters and see how that affects the model. But basically, the idea is that this column right here would be this represents like the would-be attacker that is a validator and trying to understand like what is their return on investment for an attack. And so it assumes that you have these different starting points where this is their natural attestation completion rate, and this would be their natural reward. And then this column shows, okay, if they were to do a $10 attack, how much more will their reward increase by? And then this is the difference, taking into account the costs that they've paid. And so you can see that, making all of these assumptions, no matter where they start out, it is never a good idea for them to attack because they'll always be losing money. This is with the dynamic target proposal. And what's interesting about this model is that you can see that where they start out actually impacts their ROI. And so you can adjust assumptions like the number of validators that are in the attacker's possession. So if we increase this to 4, you can see that the model will change, and then there are now some positions which become profitable. So this will just help us, one, to decide which model that we want to go with, but two, when we're thinking about how to set the parameters, we can play around with these and figure out, making sure that we're sufficiently covered. So this is the dynamic target proposal model, and then this one is the shared pool proposal. And so you can see that like one observation is that the ROI is uniform across all different starting positions. It doesn't matter what your current starting position is. If you are able to make money at one starting position, you're able to make money at any starting position. This model, one other observation is that this model is a little bit more sensitive to the implied cost for a given attestation. So if we assume that an attestation costs 5 cents, then these are all non-profitable positions. But if it is 1 cent, then it actually does become profitable. So yeah, so I think where we're at is that there's this discussion that's ongoing in this GitHub issue, and I would love for more folks to weigh in on like their thoughts on these two different models. And if there's time in this meeting, we can also go over any questions or any conversation here. But I would also like to give Victor and Ziad a chance to share any thoughts or if there are any corrections to what I just said.
So like from what I understand, there are two different proposals within the discussion that came up, right? Two different models of how to achieve attestation note incentive, right?
That's right.
So my recommendation outside of like which one is a better model and stuff is to have a separate proposal for like, for each model have a proposal. Like we can create a separate CIP attestation note incentive for one proposal, and we'll keep CIP 32 for the other, way of doing things. I think it's like really well thought out and stuff. It's just, I think because like as a CIP process, we like to do one CIP for one proposal. And if you have another idea for attestation note incentive as a separate proposal, I would like it to be as a separate CIP. That way folks can like, at least pick, at least see which CIP, proposal is the one that makes sense as a, as a solution as well.
That's fair. And just to note that these are not additive. These would be competing proposals.
Exactly.
So we would want to go with one or the other.
Exactly. So if they're going to be competing, I would recommend having two separate CIPs and stuff as a follow-on to the discussions.
Great.
So there is a lot of overlap between, I mean, most of them share the same scaffolding between the two. Like CIP 32 has a lot of elements to it, and this is only just one piece of all of its elements. And in addition to that, I don't think there's a lot of debate per se right now. It's kind of mostly between the three of us so far, although we'd love to have more people debate this for sure. And so I feel like that wouldn't necessarily be that beneficial at the moment. Oh, sorry about that. But yeah, so I don't know. I guess it seems like a little bit premature to like call them two separate proposals entirely. It's more of a debate on like the exact rate mechanism.
Yeah, I guess what we can do is after this, we can see if there's any like I agree with Victor. It would be great to just decide on one of these, given that both seem like good options, and move forward. But I'd be interested to see if there's any additional discussion or debate across the community. And if not, then perhaps we can kind of commit and move forward.
Right, but in order to commit, you need to pick one proposal to go to the review process, right? And that way, that one will be the one that we get rough consensus on and move into the review period where we can like finally decide whether we want this proposal or not. And if there's an issue with it, it goes back to draft and, there's a competing proposal for it. So I understand that, segregating things can be a bit annoying, but like, this is just to make it like a more straightforward process and stuff. Like having a CIP per proposal makes sense if there are competing proposals. Otherwise, it just confuses the whole discussion because everything start going into one CIP and people start debating separate proposals within the specific CIP rather than debating the CIP itself and what it's proposing.
I see. Yeah, I'm open to either option. I also view this as, well, it could be viewed as an implementation detail within the CIP, but it does have a slightly different design. So yeah, we can create a separate proposal and kind of track both if that's the preferred option.
Yeah, for implementation details, implementation happens when either it would require a governance process, updating the core contract, or a hard fork process. And I think that's where we can dive deeper into how you're going to implement it, whether it's CGP or something else and stuff. But like, given that there are different economic models and stuff, they're separate proposals and stuff.
Okay, so then in that case, since CIP 32 is most similar to the dynamic target proposal, I'll roll that into CIP 32, and then I'll create a new CIP with this shared pool proposal, and then we can discuss that. And I think both should be evaluated before either of them can make it to the final call.
Cool. Yeah, I think that makes the most sense and stuff, just because it makes things easier to reference them by the CIP number, which one is the shared pool proposal, which is the dynamic target proposal. So I appreciate that.
Awesome.
Just a comment from the chat here. I think a lot of people are saying that they prefer just having one proposal. Just putting it out there, we can decide on what happens.
Yeah, but like, I think the idea of a CIP process is one proposal per CIP. So I know it's convenient to mix everything into one proposal, but it just confuses the whole process. So I have a strong preference to follow the CIP process and just one proposal per CIP. If there's competing different economic models, it doesn't make sense to keep it within one CIP process or one CIP proposal.
We can create a meta CIP to decide whether we should combine the CIPs together.
Fair enough.
Cool. So with that, I'll leave it to the next person unless there's any other comments or questions.
Just a suggestion regarding how to frame the multiple proposals. We can, like the people working on this can recommend a CIP and then a governance proposal attached, and can comment if someone else likes the other approach. Feel free to open it up, so we don't spend time on opening a governance proposal. Even the people that wrote it don't think it should be passed.
Yeah, I agree with about that. If there are champions for the other competing proposal, which is the shared pool proposal, they should feel empowered to open another CIP for that. But if nobody feels empowered to do that, I'm happy if we stick to like whatever CIP 32 is championing, which I think, according to Cody, is the dynamic target proposal. Outside of the process, anyone had any questions on the actual like implementation, the difference between the two and stuff? Any thoughts on it?
I'd be curious to see kind of like, this might be a question for like later when there's a more solid implementation in place, but I'd be curious to see like whether or not like the validators themselves have an incentive to adopt this within their client version, or like if they would simply be able to just like fork this out of their client if this isn't at the contract level.
The plan so far is to have it at the contract level. So far there's no piece of this that require client changes.
Okay, so I mean, maybe I misinterpreted, but it seemed like the dynamic target would not be possible only at the contract level, or like we would need additional infrastructure to like maintain the rate. Anyway,
the proposal is to have the rate calculated or the rate tracked within the attestations contract. So we would modify that contract, and then at the end of every epoch, the payment mechanism would consult this state and determine the rates.
Right, but isn't the payment mechanism for validators within the client itself?
Yeah, the client, when the validator is calling distribute payment, it calls into a contract, which then determines the payout per validator. And so we would modify that contract that is doing the payment to then consult the attestation state.
Okay.
Just a quick question. Is there any concern about adding more transactions to the epoch change? I know we have had some hiccups in the past with large validator group set. I don't know if this is a question, but I'm actually curious. Should we be cautious?
Yeah, as part of this, early on in the CIP, I measured the current gas consumption for the distribute and compared that to what the max gas consumption is currently set at, and verified that we do have a lot of space for this. And
okay.
I don't, yeah, more than a lot of space. I can't tell you the exact numbers, but I can tell you after this call.
Right. Great.
Is the 80-20 split also being discussed, or is that solid and now it's about determining the way to calculate success rates?
So yeah, great question. The proposal as it stands is not for any of the not for any of the parameters. It's kind of like defining the scaffolding, and then we would have a separate governance proposal. We would have two governance proposals. One is to actually deploy and go with this mechanism, and then a second proposal, which would be to set those parameters.
Got it. So it's probably like launch with 0% going to attestation, and then it would be sort of turned on as that is changed.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And another quick one, and like my understanding is that adding things at the epoch has the benefit that it's automatic and also is gas free. Please correct me if I'm wrong. What are the alternative in comparison with just having one function execute that anyone can call, like the slashing for doing the calculations?
So in the case of the ability for someone to call it, are you still thinking that it would, like, the pool of rewards would come from the epoch rewards, or are you thinking of an alternative pool?
No, actually, I thought that this is calculating a reduction of the rewards rather than new rewards. Or I missed something.
No, that's right. That's right. The reason, like, part of the benefit of having it done as part of the epoch block is that we can piggyback on those same rewards and just allocate some percentage of it. If it were done as part of an async transaction, yeah, like we can do the calculation, but like, we have to figure out how those funds flow into the attestation service.
Yeah, that's a strong reason that it has to be with the epoch rewards themselves. Yeah.
We're 30 minutes into this call. Is there any other question before we move on to the next topic? Otherwise, Cody, so I'm guessing you're looking for some sort of like more consensus on which model you think would be best to go with, right? That's what you're trying to look for today, right?
Yeah, like when I was going into this discussion, I think we were happy with either one, both look good. And so I just wanted to raise it, given that this is a slight variation from what we were previously talking about, so that other folks can weigh in if it wasn't on their radar. But yeah, if we're going to go with a separate CIP altogether, then that will be a separate process.
Okay. Also, like, there can be a way where we can, like, if the question as well is to make sure it's on everyone's radar because it impacts a lot of validators, like we can reach out as well to all the validators in our ecosystem to make them aware, at the very least, of those, you know, 2 separate proposals for attestation node incentive, and to give them time to weigh in on the GitHub issue discussion before we take one or the other into the final review period and accept it as a standard. So that could be something else that we can do offline outside of this call.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do that.
Awesome. All right, then. We'll do a separate outreach to all the validators because it impacts the validators, and we can take it from there and see which way to go and stuff. We'll have a future all-core dev call, obviously, to continue the discussion. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Yeah. Can everyone see it okay?
Yep.
Awesome. So Volpe, you want to talk about implementation of CIP 33? So just to give everyone like a reminder, CIP 33 is the Celo Euro proposal. It's currently accepted as a standard, and Martin, you're going to talk about all the like the implementation details, all the CVPs that are going on mainnet next week and stuff. So whenever you want to kick it off, I can go by the CVP numbers 23, 24, 25.
Okay, thanks, Chance. So as a reminder about CIP 33, the stability mechanism for Celo Euro is going to be completely compatible with what we do with Celo dollars. So all your understanding for how it works for Celo dollars are going to apply here. And this is just enabling more buckets on a stability protocol that runs in parallel of Celo dollars, and for at the beginning for Celo Euro, but later on to be more stable assets. So please, if at some point you need some clarification about why we do some things, I can happily go over like a little bit more detail on how the stability protocol works. So first, I'm going to start with governance proposal 23. Well, there's actually one governance proposal that is not mentioned here, that is contract release 3. So contract release 3 is enabling an upgrade of the smart contracts to enable the more stable assets that can be stabilized by the reserve. And also it's a contract release, so it has a bunch of other upgrades. But I think we have discussed that in the past, so I won't get much detail into that. So let's begin. So the first specific to Celo Euro is activation. So as you may know, all the stable assets that we want to have need to have a set of oracles. And this proposal is enable 10 addresses and also proposes to use 100 Celo Euro from the community fund for each of these addresses. And the rationale is just pay for gas fees. Those 100 Celo, we did the math, and should be enough for at least a couple of years of gas fees. Another thing this proposal does is freezing both stable token and exchange Euro contracts. There's no much risk about, like, you could argue it's not 100% needed, this freezing, because as we won't have oracles report, like exchange Euro is going to be unusable. You won't be able to mint nor burn Celo Euros because also the reserve doesn't have the exchange authorized. But this just add an extra layer of security just to make sure that it's impossible, completely impossible to move and transact sell euros before it's fully activated. I think it's better just to go through all of them and then taking all questions at once. So we get an understanding first. This one is a little bit of an administrative task. Every method for each core contract has a constitution parameter. That means how is the threshold for the percentage of the governance proposal, the minimal threshold required to pass that the governance proxy makes a call to this contract. For example, if the number is 90%, that means that the governance proposal involved in calling that function has to be 90% of positive votes. And this is set for pretty much every single contract that we have currently in the core contracts. And as we are deploying new contracts, namely exchange euros and stable token euros, we need to send them for them. And I use the same train of thought we use for solo dollars. So we have the same parameters as we did with solo dollars. And also adding these parameters for new methods. Like if you can scroll to the bottom, we have these new methods in the reserve, in the contract release tree, there we go. Add exchange spender and remove exchange spender. So this is also included in the upgrade. And one notice, this governance proposal and the governance proposal I mentioned before don't require contract release tree to be executed in order to be executed. They can be executed before because basically they just update the mapping without doing much checking before execution. So in order to execute this proposal and the Oracle activation and freezing, we only need addresses for contract release tree, but there's no concern about the order in which they get executed. And we actually try to execute it in reverse order on Baklava, and that passes without issues. And I go to the last one, that this has to be executed after the Oracle activation. So it's IP 23 and 25, namely Oracle activation and freezing, and actually not with after 25, that is the constitutional parameters, but it's actually nice to have because it uses methods which the constitutional parameters we set in CIP 25. And this is the final enabling of the stable token for full trading and being completely immovable. So it first does the unfreezing. Let's remember that these transactions happen atomically. So the order is not that important here. So we unfreeze both contracts. We add exchange euro as a reserve spender. That means that it can take sell out of the reserve to fill their buckets. We have the Oracle we add the stable token to the reserve so that the reserve is aware that the stable token exists and can count it as its liabilities, so to speak. And it also enables sell euro as a gas currency. That means the validators should be able to, people should be able to bid with the euro for gas fees, so that someone that only has sell euro in their wallets will be able to move them without any stable token. And this is completely, it's the exact same thing about like how sell dollars work. And this proposal is not written down yet, but it can include some change in the parameters of the buckets. There's one parameter in exchange.sol that is called reserve fraction. That is how much of the reserve shall be in the buckets. And it's a value that is related to the current liquidity of seller against euro in the market, and for the sellers, for seller against dollars in the market. So this will be a last chance to update that parameter in case new exchanges or more liquidity was like if the liquidity situation changes at the time of enabling Cell Euro, we can scale up or down the parameters. And those parameters are set on contract release 3. And that is about it regarding Cell Euros.
Yeah, and as a reminder to everyone, the CGPs that have been gone over are part of multiple CGPs that are going to be going on mainnet next Tuesday. I'm going to put a copy paste the link to it here, including the CGP that have been going over today, the core contracts release 3, and another CGP we're going to cover later. So does anyone have any questions on the CIP 33 implementation details and all the CGPs covered, 23, 24, and 25?
Yeah, I had a question on are all of these CGPs being planned to be proposed? I guess you mentioned that the execution order is important for the activation. And so like, what is the plan for the order in which these are proposed?
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, there's some clarification. Maybe we need some correction in the forum post. Cell Euro activation is not going to be proposed next Tuesday. It has to be hold waiting for CIP 23 passed. But other than that, there's no like contract release 3, CIP 23 and 25 can execute in any order.
So just to clarify again, CGP 24 won't be submitted on Tuesday, you said, right? You have to wait for everything else to be executed. All right, so what I'm gonna do on the forum post, I'm gonna remove the CGP 24 and maybe I'll put it on a different date, probably after the execution of the other ones.
Yeah, because the reason is like CIP 24 is unfreezing the contracts. Okay. And CIP 23 is freezing the contract. So if they get executed in reverse order, it's not fun.
Fair enough. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, just thinking about how we get this done sooner rather than later. So I guess like 23 and 25 are going to go out next Tuesday. So that will mean voting starts Thursday. Then we would, if everything goes well and the community approve, we will execute those the following Tuesday. What day are we looking to propose activation? 20, I guess we can't propose it because we don't have the contract addresses until sometime after that Tuesday. Is that right, Pope?
No, actually the addresses are set at the moment contract release 3 is proposed. And also okay. you assume it passes, right? Because if it doesn't pass, then you'll have new addresses.
Got it. So okay. So is 24 about having two? Do we only want to activate when we have 2 exchanges or more? Then is that right, the general idea? Okay. Yeah. So it could be
that's a required property because. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so it could be potentially like weeks later. We even want to put 24 out there.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason for that is that if you only have one listing, then if for some reason that exchange goes down, the stability protocol will help. The reserve is protected, like we have that scenario in the past, but it's not ideal that we rely on just one exchange for the stability mechanism to work.
Right.
Given that it's going to take time for the tooling to catch up here a little bit, CLI, the wallets and everything, it's not necessarily a bad thing that it sits around for a few more weeks before it's activated.
Exactly. Yeah, regarding that, like as a implementation, Amy and the X team at Silas have been done an amazing work. Shout out also to Trevor. So we have contract kit already supporting Cell Euro, CLI on the work. Cliento, which is the Go client for Celo, it's being worked on right now. So regardless of how long we hold CIP24 for mainnet, the tooling is, most of the tooling is going to be ready in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, so would a good target date be Tuesday, March 30th to propose CGP 24 tentatively? It's 2 weeks from next Tuesday, so that'll be.
I don't know if we should commit to a date because it depends on external factors. Or at least the way I see it, like I will be more comfortable passing 24 after we have one more exchange listing. Okay. So I don't know what everyone else is saying.
From my point of view, we can just remove 24 for now. I would like us to have at least a tentative date, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever everyone's comfortable with. And the reason is just because we can alert everyone about something going on mainnet ahead of time. Because we also have a cadence for the governance process and stuff when we want to activate. So yeah, I mean, we'll just remove it for now, and then we can sync up later on when is the tentative date that we want to add it to mainnet, and we'll see how next week it plays out and stuff.
Amazing.
Any more comments? Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question. Have any exchanges publicly announced that they are going to support Celo Euro?
So far, the only exchange supporting Celo against the euro is Coinbase, that they support at the same time as they support the Celo against the dollar, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. Currently, I'm not aware of any listing related Celo euros. Celo against the euro, sorry, not Celo euros.
But it is true that like exchanges often don't make their plans public ahead of time. So.
Alrighty. I'm not sure if there's any more questions. Now it's a good time to ask before we move on to the next topic. Okay. Next up, so CIP 29 is already an accepted standard. It was proposed by Victor Boonin from Bicentennial. So what we're going to cover today is CGP 27, which set the grace period value that's been specified in CIP 29. And further added context, the contract release 3 is what's going to introduce the grace period governable parameter, but it doesn't set it to any value, and CGP 27 is what would set it to that value. And to talk about that more, York will cover it.
I'll keep this super brief because we have talked a lot about this in the past. But yeah, the decision was made to make this governable, and contracts release 3 has already gone out on Alpha and Baklava, and the corresponding proposal for the grace period also went out on the testnets, and look out for the proposal on mainnet next week. That should be it.
Cool. And yeah, it's again, if you want to read on the standard CIP 29, this is the standard. So by the 2 governable proposals, one introduces the governable parameter, but doesn't set it to any value. And then the CGP 27 was set to the specified value by CIP 29. But yeah, any comments and stuff? Questions? Okay, if there's no further comments, just a heads up, it's gonna hit mainnet being proposed either Tuesday, Wednesday, or whenever. I think it's gonna be on Tuesday, yeah. And yeah, so with
Just,
that, yeah.
One question, it has to be executed after control release 3 executed, right? So the question is it safe? Is it safe enough to publish at the same time?
Yeah, actually, so execution will fail if it's published at the same time. And so basically execution will only pass if it's executed after contracts release 3. And there's no danger in executing it beforehand because the transaction just reverts.
Yeah, and also I believe the tooling won't let you. It will tell you like this method doesn't exist and it won't let you deploy.
There's ways around that, but yeah.
So would it make sense, given that because we have more than one proposal and stuff like that, like to batch them? So like CGP 27 and the rest can happen the day after, just to allow that one extra day where execution happened on core contract release 3 before the next day the execution can happen on the other CGPs.
Yep, I think that makes sense to me. And I'm actually not sure what the concurrent proposal parameter is on mainnet, but I don't think we would want to include this in favor of any of the Celo Euro proposals.
For sure, for sure.
So
yeah. So we can sync offline which one to batch first and stuff, including the Celo Euro and stuff, just to make sure that whatever gets, just to make sure that at least contract release 3 gets executed first before any of the subsequent one, whether CGP 27, 23, 25, or 24 come after and stuff. And we can figure out which one goes first, stuff. Cool.
And I have one comment, like Jörg mentioned the deployment status for this proposal, and I forgot to mention the ones related to Celo Euro on testnets. So just wanted to give a heads up. We have Celo Euro fully activated on Baklava. So all those 3 governance proposals passed, and on Alfajores, we are only needing to execute the Celo Euro activation. We are currently finishing up some final run of testing, and Celo Euro should be fully activated on Alfajores tomorrow.
Cool. Awesome. All right. I don't know if there's any more questions. How much time do we have? We have 7 minutes left. Okay. CIP 37 is proposed by Aaron. I'm not sure if Aaron or Martin are here. Are they? Okay. Unfortunately, what I like is, like, if you champion a proposal, it's up to you to try to, discuss it and stuff. But if they're not here, we can move it to a future all-core dev call. Let's see. Okay. So I think that's a wrap so far, given that, they're not here to champion their proposal for now. Yeah.
Well, I've been thinking about this. Like, I didn't write that particular proposal, but I remember chatting with some people about that proposal. And it's also like a fairly simple naming convention. So I would like to just hear what people think, because I remember when I discussed it, some people were for, some people were against. And the governance proposal is just referring to every ERC20 compatible token that is deployed on Celo to be named in a different way that makes it clear that lives on a Celo network, so that people don't think Celo it's a token on Ethereum mainnet. So I guess we will give them a space to champion the governance proposal, but I would just like to hear if anyone has some strong opinion for and against.
Are there any proposals as part of this as to what that standard naming should be?
Down in the proposal, it should be CRC20, or if you scroll down a little bit more, I think there's an alternative one.
I think
yeah, it was up there. It said CERC 20.
Yeah, CERC.
CRC 20. So I think for CERC 20 can be an interesting moniker if you want to adopt an Ethereum request for comment specification. And that shouldn't happen only for ERC 20. What I like to do is, like, if we have something like an informational, why not do it for every ERC specification out there? If it's an ERC specification, you can rename it to something else. That's one point, right? The other thing is James Prestwich kind of mentioned that before we can do something like this, like adoption and stuff, it's a problem that exists even in layer 2 solutions, like even in Optimism and stuff like that on Ethereum, where people accidentally send an ERC20 from Ethereum to a layer 2 and stuff, and that kind of problem can happen. So while I'm okay with like renaming just to avoid confusion, I think the bigger issue has been that because this is to avoid folks accidentally sending Ethereum ERC20 to Celo, I want us to think more like a high level how to solve that problem. And I'm not super convinced that renaming ERC20 solved that problem on its own. There is a path for thinking about how to adopt ERC20's renaming convention. I just don't see that here. And I see here the motivation is separate than what the proposal is proposing. And that's like my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, my personal take on that is that if you go to docs.celo.org, you're gonna see Celo is an ERC20 compatible token. Mm-hmm. And if you go to any exchange, they are gonna tell you only send ERC20 compatible tokens to this address, right? So I can really see a lot of people being really easily confused like that. And I do agree that we could extrapolate this to any ERC. This is one critical because it will prevent a lot of people sending funds to the wrong address and potentially with a permanent loss of funds.
Yeah. The other thing is, I think what you mentioned as well, documentation, we can always upgrade documentation. If the documentation says we're ERC20 compatible, we need to clarify that language 100%, and I can make it an action item for myself to do that. The other thing about exchanges, yeah, I think like it's a problem with exchanges as well. One interesting idea that was like floated was, you know, having something at the address level when you're sending, let's say, to a seller address, instead of that 0x, maybe having a naming convention like Celo, and then you put the address versus what an Ethereum public address might be. So that might be another avenue. James had an interesting Twitter thread about this. And this is not a problem unique to Celo. If a lot of EVM compatible chains will have that kind of issue. So I think the concern here is we shouldn't rush to adopt something that might not follow the rest of the convention EVM chains and stuff. And if we're going to adopt something, at the very least, we want to make sure that we can advocate it to the rest of all the EVM-based chain. And there are proposals that make sure that it's chain agnostic proposals like that, like having a CX or CR, like a Celo address name, monikers and stuff like that. So I think that's why it's a good debate to have, and include others as well, just to give their feedback on it. But it's an important debate to have for sure. We're currently we have 1 minute left, so I want to take this time, like we can push this proposal for the future all-core dev call, have Aaron include James and everyone to weigh in on it. The one thing I want to say is, just as a reminder, we have the governance proposals happening next week. They're on our forum. I shared the link here in our chat. We also have the core community happy hour happening later today. I shared the calendar event. If you don't have it, it's also on Celo Signal. Celo Signal now, there's a documentation page on Celo Signal under the validator guide. So if you go down here, we have the public calendar. You can always add it to yourself, and you can always add the mailing list if you want to keep in touch on Celo Signal updates and stuff. And also, is there any other updates that we need to give? Oh yeah. Another reminder, if you haven't updated to version 1.2.4, do so ASAP. I can't stress this enough. So please definitely do that. And with that, any final comments before we shut it off? Alrighty. So thank you again for another awesome all-core dev call. I think we had a lot of interesting debate, and we'll schedule another one for the future to continue all these debates and stuff. And yeah, take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Yas.
Bye.
See you.
Thanks all.